Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam, and I'm pleased to be joined now by my friend Nolan Knight. Nolan is a sports anchor currently at WNCT, Virginia Tech alum. So, again, we're continuing our thread of Hokie alums. Nolan, thank you so much for joining us on your day off.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm happy to talk with you. I haven't spoke to you in a while, so it's almost a nice little reunion as well.
Yeah, for sure. For full disclosure, me and Nolan both multimedia and journalism majors at Virginia Tech and did a lot of games together. In fact, I don't think I worked more games with someone more than Nolan. So we go way back.
Likewise. Definitely
Yeah,
didn't call any games with anyone close to as many as we did. A lot of good memories in the booth together.
yeah, for sure. So kind of going off of that, Nolan. I guess the first question I'll ask, basic question: Who is Nolan Knight?
Uh, Nolan Knight pretends that he's a sports anchor. No. I am. How old am I now? 24 now. Living in Greenville, North Carolina, working at WNCT here. And we do Greenville, North Carolina is home to, of course, the Pirates. And so I've become one of the biggest Pirate fans and Pirate fanatics that you could think of since I've been down here getting to cover East Carolina. Before I was here, I spent a year in West Virginia, in Oak Hill, West Virginia, which is about an hour and 30 minutes away from Blacksburg. In Oak Hill, we covered the Bluefield Beckley market. If for anyone watching that is familiar with West Virginia at all. And before then, of course, I was at Virginia Tech. I'm a big sports fan. I'm a Hokie through and through. I grew up going to games. That's kind of where I developed my passion for sports was in Lane Stadium with my mom and dad rooting on the Hokies as a child. And, that love for Virginia Tech turned into a passion for sports casting. And I'm lucky enough to continue this dream of mine of being a professional sports broadcaster. And I feel like I'm on towards the right path of things I need to do to stick this out and make it a career rather than, 1 or 2 year stint.
Hey, you mentioned your passion for sports started in Lane Stadium. I asked Brady Hess this question last week. Most memorable game you've attended at Lane Stadium?
I've attended some really good ones. Well, actually, that's probably a lie. I've attended some really bad ones. Normally, my parents would take me along for, normally a surefire win. Two stand out specifically. Most memorable would definitely be a Thursday night matchup. I think Virginia Tech was ranked in the top 10, taking on number 3 Boston College, Matt Ryan. Downpour of a game, and the Hokies absolutely blow what would have been, a game that could have put them probably in the national, championship if the season turns out the way things would have been. They were up 10 points or so, and they ended up losing that game, and that was just heartbreaking. It was raining, it was cold, but I remember I got a Thursday. It was a Thursday night game. I got out of school to go to it. That was really memorable. And there's another game that comes to mind, Kent State. Julian Edelman, I think, was the quarterback, unless
Wow.
it was the Wes Welker, whichever one of those players was a quarterback in high school or college at Kent State. And Brandon Flowers just absolutely lit up this guy, and that's a strong one I remember too. I've been to a lot of them. I could go on forever about all the games I went to growing up. It was a huge passion of mine, and one I developed from my father. So shout out to him for Father's Day, I guess.
And you mentioned most memorable game. How about the worst game you've seen as a Hokie fan in Lane Stadium? Now, you can take it as gut-wrenching loss or blowout. I mean, however you take it, what's the worst game you've seen in Lane Stadium?
I think I could say Boston College again, or rather, I could say, yeah, Boston College again, and I will say Boston College again, except my what year was it? It was a cold and snowy the day after Halloween. I was in college, so I was having some fun on Halloween night, and it was a noon game. I woke up to go to the game, and it was cold, it was snowy, it was gross, and Tech ended up losing at home in front of a hardly filled Lane Stadium. That was by far the worst game that I've been there, just in terms of fan atmosphere, the game. It might have been Pittsburgh. It was either Pittsburgh or Boston College the day after Halloween, and it was snowing and raining and gross, and not a good day to be a Hokie that day by any means. They would end up losing it as well.
How about this? Who do you think is the Mount Rushmore of Virginia Tech football players? If you had to pick 4 guys you'd put on your Mount Rushmore, who would you put on there?
I'd have to go with my Mount Rushmore. I think a lot of people get this question wrong because they'll say, this in my mind, no doubt about it, Michael Vick, Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor was, and still is my favorite Hokie of all time. I'm hoping that he gets to start a couple of games this year for the Chargers. So definitely Tyrod Taylor, Michael Vick are definitely on there. I think a lot of other people will probably put, one of the untouchables on there, but I was a little young to really remember them. Let's see here. I at the time, Sam Rogers was pretty, he's great. I mean, he was everything that I think, Virginia Tech football is. So I'll put Sam Rogers on there. And then I'll put a personal favorite on there that is
No Bruce Smith. I mean, NFL Hall of Famer, probably after Vic.
Yeah, he's great. But again, this is my personal one, not the one for the school. And from growing up watching games, I kind of want to say Xavier DB, maybe, which is a linebacker with the opposite side of Vince Hall that same year that Tech lost to Boston College. I think he was on the 07 team or so. So I'll go Xavier DB or Vince Hall, one or the other. And that linebacker core that defense back then was unstoppable. Could have won national championship if a couple things flipped, I think.
All right, and talking about your time as a student at Virginia Tech, you initially wanted to do play-by-play. In fact, you went to the Northwoods League, was the play-by-play broadcaster for, at the time, it was the Green Bay Bullfrogs. Now it's the Green Bay Booyah.
Yeah.
Actually, we were both in the state of Wisconsin in the summer of 2017. You were in Green Bay. I was on the Cross. Unfortunately, because we weren't in the same division, we didn't have a chance to link up because our teams didn't play. But what are some of your memories of your one summer in the Northwoods League calling games for at the time, Green Bay Bullfrogs?
Here recently, a lot of times, you'll get the Facebook notifications or the Twitter notifications, 1 year ago today or whatever. And, those memories have been filling my mind as we get into the summer more, and I'll see more and more of those. But nothing but good things to say. What an experience to be able to say, yeah, I lived in Green Bay for a summer, and that conversation comes up pretty often, and it's a lot of fun. My main memory is driving into Green Bay, not knowing a lot about Green Bay, only basically knowing that the Packers played there. So I'm rolling up, waiting to see this, NFL city with a skyline and all this stuff to do. But if you ever been to Green Bay, none of that stuff is there. It's a small little town that just happens to have the Packers that play there. And so that's my first memory was waiting to see this big city and never seeing it. But that summer was great. The connections you make. A buddy of mine, Ben Murray, we became really good friends. He was the video coordinator. I was the play-by-play guy. He actually just got engaged. So congratulations to him. He won't see this probably, but those are the connections that those are the type of connections you make, which are lifelong, and the experience is invaluable. You don't get paid much going there, if at all, for some people. But what you get out of it is I wouldn't have the job I have today if it wasn't for, going to Green Bay. And I think every step in your career is kind of the same way.
And, another part of the Northwoods League is the bus rides. What was your longest bus ride? I think for me, I had 2 9-hour bus rides from La Crosse. We'd go to Thunder Bay, Canada, as well as Bismarck, North Dakota. Did you have any similar long bus rides?
Yeah, I think very similar. There was 9, and then you could have done 10 if you stretched it out in the east. Was it the east and west? Is that what they called it?
I think it was north and south.
North and south. So whichever one I was in, I guess, assuming I was south then, we would go all the way to Battle Creek, Michigan, and Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they were 9 or 10 hours. Battle Creek was the farthest, but you would normally take a stop in Kalamazoo, play a couple of games in Kalamazoo, then go to Battle Creek, and then go, stay the night, and they wouldn't make it as bad. But that was definitely the longest. And you're just what's funny about those things is you're never off the clock because you go to bed and it's not like you can go home. You're still in Michigan or Wisconsin or whatever, so you're constantly working. You develop good relationships with the players, and it's kind of fun. As we get older, the players that you made connections with, a lot of them continue their professional career. So it's kind of fun to keep in touch with them and see how they're doing it in terms of, trying to make it to the majors and whatnot. So that's really exciting. And the bus rides didn't really get under my skin. I didn't mind them because that's when I, get most of my work done in terms of writing articles and game notes and that kind of stuff.
For sure. And yeah, especially recently with the MLB draft, you get to see guys who potentially you were working on the team with, maybe get drafted, play professional ball. You were at Virginia Tech at an interesting time, but in fact, we both overlapped. But kind of in this transition when Virginia Tech was starting to work at the AC network, and then sort of when all of the sports media concentration communication stuff really exploded. What's it like now for you to see your alma mater really sort of developing a prominent sports media program with 304 Sports and everything else going on, for you to be a part of it, or at least having led to it? Are you a little jealous at all that, you're not there right now? I mean, what is that like seeing all this stuff happening at Tech now?
Yes and no. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't jealous of the opportunities that those guys are getting in 3304. Especially, I ran into a bunch of them covering the ACC tournament. I was covering North Carolina when they played Virginia Tech the first day of the ACC tournament this year before, it all got canceled. And so getting to see them, I was definitely jealous of the fact that they had those opportunities. And I guess we probably could have had those opportunities if we would have really stuck our neck out there. But of course, having a class, kind of can pushes that narrative a little further, and they're doing great things. But at the same time, because there wasn't really a set major, there were a lot of opportunities that if you searched out for them, there was a lot of unadvertised opportunities that we had with the IMG group. And I don't know how many more on-air reps I would have had if there was that much more competition. So in a sense, I'm jealous, but at the same time, I kind of came in between to where I got a lot of opportunities, and then Bill Roth joined the team, and I got a lot more tutelage from of course Bill Roth and Andrew Allegretti, and taking all those classes and whatnot. So I feel like I got a best of both worlds of having a lot of reps on air, and of course taking some of those classes like the first play-by-play class that Bill put together.
Yeah, definitely agree. You made the most out of your time at Virginia Tech. So kind of going now to, you graduate from Tech. How do you end up with a job in West Virginia?
So like I was saying with the Northwoods League thing, everything that you do down to, campus radio at WUVT that we both took at Tech, every step helps you get the next thing. And so that was one of the first things was when I got to school, I did WUVT, which led to an opportunity with IMG, which led to an opportunity in the Coastal Plains League working for the Petersburg Generals, which led to the opportunity to, more getting better and having more reps and getting more on-air opportunities with IMG, which then led to the Northwoods League, and then all of, the reps and the real opportunities that you get from doing all these different things, lead to an internship that I got when I was at Tech. Things were winding down around this time. It was about after, it was right before spring break, actually, because I remember taking a week off for spring break. And I was, looking for job opportunities. I wasn't getting as many play-by-play reps because the ACC network was coming in, and they were being not as lenient of putting someone that's not the greatest play-by-play caster of all time on air, which is me. So I was getting less opportunities on air, and so I was seeking some new ones, and a lot of different avenues opened up with that, with 105.3 The Bear and high school sports network or whatever it was I was calling football games for. during the fall. And so I started looking at different things I could do. And of course, I think most people in the sportscasting industry knows about STAA. And so I started looking at, entry level jobs that maybe that I could apply for, since I did have a bunch of experience. And one of them that popped up was Bluefield, West Virginia. Of course, the Bluefield Blue Jays are there, and we've known people that have broadcasted for them in the past. Danny Noakes, Bailey Angle, of course, is still getting some reps in there as well. And, Brady gets on air with them sometimes also with doing PA. So I knew that they were close. So I reached out to that one, and it was a television station, WVVA, in Bluefield. He responded to me, and the news director at the time, and said that I had issues in my resume. It kind of pointed out all the problems I had, and so I realized that maybe I should be a little more professional about this and get my eggs in a bunch before I really start applying to these careers, which is what I was applying to. I mean, being a sportscaster at a television station isn't easy. And so, but he still brought me in for an interview, sat me down, and I auditioned and everything, and he told me, look, like, you're not in a position to be our sports director, which is like the heads of the sports department. And he was right. Probably shouldn't have came in, but he's like, we have this open spot. We have one guy doing two jobs. Would you want to come in part-time? I was like, yes, of course. And so I started coming in part-time. I do 2 times a week. I get off from class sometimes, go out to Bluefield, which is about an hour drive, hour and 15 or so. And then I would sportscast, and then I'd come back that same night. It was a lot of traveling, and I did it for almost the entirety of the second semester. End of the semester comes, I tell them, hey, like, I'm interested in, working for you guys as the weekend broadcaster here. And they're kind of like, we've already kind of decided that we're going to go a different route, which was really disappointing after I felt like I was doing pretty good work without too much guidance. And so then, that was about the week when graduation happened. And I was jobless. I didn't know what to do, which I think a lot of people that are in communications or in journalism are at, because you can't really apply in February for these jobs, because these news stations and newspapers and stuff, they have openings that need to be filled right now, and they'll hire someone by, when you graduate in May or June or whatever it is. And so I did graduation. I woke up for graduation not having a job in hand. And that day, I got a phone call for an interview at WOAY in Oak Hill, West Virginia. And that was the first step. I graduated. I walked across the stage, and then the next week I went out to Oak Hill, and they offered me the job on my way home. So that was great. I was thrilled about it, and they, of course, had seen me on television when I was working at their competitor at WVVA. And so that's what I'm saying when, each thing you do leads to the next thing. And, sometimes it feels like something you might be doing is a waste of time, but every experience that you get it's the reason you get the next job you got. And so, I got fired essentially at the last job. I guess I wasn't getting fired, but that led to the opportunity in Oak Hill at WAY, and then of course that led to this job here.
And what's it like being in North Carolina? I mean, really your first time outside of the state of Virginia, or in the vicinity of Blacksburg. Here you are in North Carolina, in Greenville. So what's that experience been like?
What's great about it, and what I really like about it, and what's made it go by really fast, whereas, my days in West Virginia a lot of time were numbered. I was counting down the days until I could apply to new jobs or have enough experience to get out of West Virginia, because I was, pretty unhappy there, being so far away from home and friends. And, I did get to go, to Blacksburg and visit some people from time to time. But what's cool about here in Greenville is that it's only an hour, 45 minutes if you're really rushing to get to my home in Suffolk. So it's like I'm back home here, which is what I love. I want to be close to home. And I like being close to home. I can go visit. My parents can come down whenever I want to. Yesterday I went out to the Outer Banks, which is, that's 2 hours. So being here in the culture of Eastern North Carolina is very similar to the culture of the 757. So I love it here, and being close to home is great. My boss is from Chesapeake, which is also in the 757. So it really feels like home here. And covering East Carolina sports are great. I was unaware of how strong the fan base is, but East Carolina fans are, I mean, they're like Virginia Tech fans. There aren't as many of them, but they care about East Carolina sports just as much as Virginia Tech fans care about Virginia Tech sports. And so that's really fun covering a team that has a strong following, because when you're reporting on stuff that means something to people, it makes reporting on it more fun.
What's your day-to-day routine like? You wake up in the morning. What's kind of your routine in terms of getting story ideas and then ultimately putting together something that goes on air?
Well, it's different now with COVID. It's not similar at all. When there wasn't COVID, a weekday, I'm the weekend sports anchor. So, I'm anchoring on Saturday and Sunday. But on a weekday, when COVID's not really a thing, if there's not a big story that's happening, a lot of times it's going in and going to a press conference, at waking up, to a press conference at like 11 or so, and then putting together whatever the big story was at the press conference. If the player got hurt, if, the coach said something funny or whatever it is, and getting that ready for the 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock show. Once you have that ready for the 5 and 6 o'clock, maybe you'll go home for a couple hours, then go back out and shoot highlights of whatever sport's going on. So like volleyball, if it's in the spring, or, high school. Obviously, Friday nights you got high school football, or on Thursday sometimes there'll be a game. And, if it's during the winter, you have high school basketball to go to. So it's a lot of highlights. And a lot of times it's kind of tough to get packages and stories together. But since COVID has happened, there's no highlights to shoot. So it's every day waking up, doing whatever story you had planned for the day, and then when that's done, setting up a story for the next day. So like after I get off air with you, I got to figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow. So and then it's a lot of leeway of, as long as you put everything where it needs to be and you're doing your job correctly, you get a lot of freedom in what you do and what you report on, and just trying to make interesting stories, and sometimes just trying to get something on air when there aren't sports going on right now. Sometimes you kind of have to make something out of nothing, which us sports guys have become really good at recently.
Do you find yourself feeling more comfortable on air, or is there ever really a point you feel comfortable on air? I mean, what's your take on all of that?
Yes. Comfortable on air for sure. But it being on air is so thrilling. There's nothing like it. And that's one of the fun things about working on TV is that every night, you get to go on air 3 or 4 times, and you only get, 2 minutes at 5 o'clock, 2:30 at 6 o'clock, and 3 minutes at 11 o'clock. So the cool thing about working on TV is you get so many different reps, and they're only 2 or 3 minute reps. So like when you're doing play-by-play, you have a 3-hour game. If you make a mistake, you can make up for it later in the game. When you're on TV, if you make a mistake, your whole sportscast is almost ruined. So it's getting comfortable on air is definitely something that you get over pretty quickly, because what I related to a lot of times is if you're a cornerback, if you played football in high school or wherever, like if you're a cornerback and you get beat on a play, they're not going to take you out, but you have to forget about the fact you just made a huge mistake and get ready for the next play. And it's kind of the same working in television, that if you have a bad show, you got to, maybe be upset with yourself and figure out what went wrong, and give yourself maybe 5 minutes to be upset about it, but be ready for your next show, because you don't want to have anything affect your next one. And so, I don't think you're ever comfortable, like completely comfortable on air, because it's such a weird environment. You're in an empty, cold studio, and there's you're looking inside of a camera with 1,000 some people watching you. So it never will feel normal, but you get used to it, and you develop a voice. You develop the way that you write your scripts and the way you tell stories, and you get a really cool sense of doing things the way that you want to do them.
Do people ever stop you on the street while you're shooting video or something along those lines, and they say, really appreciate the work you're doing? We watch your broadcast every night. I mean, do you have interactions like that? And when you do, what does that mean to you when you get feedback like that?
Sometimes. I'm still waiting to get stopped at the grocery store. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't waiting to get recognized, not because I want to, but I hear all these stories from my coworkers like, oh, I got recognized, and I'm like, yeah, no one knows who I am. But maybe that's a good thing. But no, when I'm at games, a lot of wearing the WNTC shirt, a lot of times, especially if we just recently did a story on the team or something. People will say that that they watch our Touchdown Friday show or something else we did. And whenever you get recognized for your work in a good light, is one of the biggest perks of the job, because you're putting together content. You're putting together something for other people to enjoy, and when you're not getting any feedback on it, it's kind of frustrating. Sometimes I'd rather hear bad things about it, so I at least know that someone watched it than it just went out to nobody. But I think all that stuff kind of is a little bit vain in wanting that kind of stuff to happen. But at the same time, it's part of the job, wanting to get a little recognition for the hard work you put in. But at the same time, it's, you put so much stuff out there that you're just hoping that you put together a good piece that tells a true story and tells a story that can connect to people.
Transitioning now to your sports fandom, because I know you're a big sports fan, not just doing it for a living, but also just watching sports in general. Going back to Virginia Tech, what are your expectations for the team this season, assuming there is football, of course, but you've got a lot of starters returning on defense. Hokies came within a game of making it back to the ACC championship game. Do you expect the Hokies to make it to the ACC championship game this season?
I think that it would be a bit of a disappointment if they didn't. And we're at this point where, Fuente's got his guys in there. It's everyone that's on the team are Fuente's guys. I think there's a lot of pressure on him, from the fan base and from a lot of other people, because there's a winning culture at Virginia Tech. And I think it's easy for people to say that, like, people are being hard on him, but at the same time, if you want to have a winning football program, you got to have a great coach. And that's why I really hope that the football season happens this year, because I think there's a lot of pieces in place for Virginia Tech to be playing in the ACC championship. I think that a 10-win season is more than possible for the Hokies this year with Hendon Hooker and all the other returning keys that they've gotten. I mean, you put Hendon Hooker into the season last year, and I think it's a 10-win season for Virginia Tech. And so I think Hendon Hooker's great. I think the recruiting class this past year was a little disappointing and underwhelming for a lot of people. But if the Hokies can pull together a really good season this year, I think it would be exciting. But like I said, I'm worried about the college football. I don't want to make any predictions or anything, but I just really hope there's a season, and hopefully that does happen, because the stars were aligned. I was looking forward more to this Virginia Tech season under Fuente and Hendon Hooker than any other in the past that I can think of.
So if the Hokies were not to make it to the ACC championship game, should Fuente be fired? I know you mentioned, he's gotten a lot of chatter from the fan base, and there was a lot of that chatter last year when the Hokies weren't looking too good, especially after that Friday night loss to Duke, and then they turned it around and were able to, put together a respectable season. Is Fuente on the hot seat if he's unable to make it to the ACC championship game?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it depends how the season goes. I mean, if the Hokies don't make a bowl game, yeah, probably should be on the hot seat, rightfully so. But at the same time, North Carolina, man, they got a great team. Sam Howell I think he's a Heisman candidate this year. The quarterback they've gotten, they have some really good playmakers on that team as well, which is kind of scary to see. North Carolina is really good. Of course, Miami's always going to bring it to you. So the coastal race will be like it always is, but if the Hokies don't win at least 8 games, then I think that it's fair to say that Fuentes, should be maybe on the hot seat. That might be a pessimistic view on it, but when you watch football, you look at the best teams in the country. Yes, Virginia Tech's working with less. Everyone knows that. They don't have the budget that a lot of other teams do, but we do have a fan base that cares deeply about the product that's out on the field. And why shouldn't they be disappointed if, they can't win 10 games with, 20 returning starters or 17 or however many it is?
What'd you think of when Fuente was being courted by Baylor? He was seen as one of Baylor's top candidates to take over that job. The way I looked at it, I mean, Baylor's a better facility. You're in the Big 12. I mean, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma has been linked to a lot of jobs. So if he leaves, especially in the NFL, if he left Oklahoma, all of a sudden, Fuente, if you're at Baylor, maybe you have the ability to overtake Oklahoma in the Big 12. What was your thoughts on that? Do you believe that he pretty much turned down the job? I mean, certainly was kind of interesting given everything going on with the transfer portal that Fuente was being courted by Baylor at the time.
I think it's a good thing that, I'll say our because I'm a big Virginia Tech alumni, fan and alumni. I think it's a good thing that our coach was, getting courted by a different coach or a different program. I mean, that means that, we do have a good guy in this system. It's tough to say. I think it's a good thing. I think it would be, I think it's intelligent for our coach to at least listen to offers unless, we're paying him the most money in the country. And, Virginia Tech is not paying him the most money in the country because they don't have the funds to. There's not, look at Buzz Williams. He went down to Texas. There's not income tax, or I don't know how it works. I don't want to say something that's not true, but Buzz Williams makes more money per dollar down there because of, tax reasons being in Texas. So he gets paid more money from going down there, even if they offer him the same contract that he's getting here. So, he's making decisions that's going to be best for him. I think for Virginia Tech fans, it's just frustrating because, we're coming off of a coach that was so loyal to Virginia Tech through and through that it's almost, appalling to think that, our coach would go somewhere else that's not here. And I think everyone had a bad taste in their mouth from when Buzz Williams left as well.
And, speaking of the fan base, you talked about it, Lane Stadium is a, great place to play at. You got Enter Sandman. I mean, the fans are pretty passionate. But I think a lot of people are frustrated by the fact that it doesn't seem like Virginia Tech can pull off a lot of quote unquote big games at home. I mean, when you and I were both students at Tech, I mean, we saw Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame come into town. Hokies weren't able to pull off a win when those teams came into town. Do you kind of understand the fan frustration about, we've got a good enough program, a good enough atmosphere, we should be able to knock off some of these big teams every once in a while, or do you think it's a little overblown?
I think it's a little overblown. Texas has got a lot of great wins, over the past 20 years. We've had some elite teams too, but we haven't had elite teams, since probably the last Tyrod Taylor year. It's been a while. Well, no, there were some Logan Thomas teams that were pretty good too. I mean, we haven't had a lot of elite teams, and so it's going to be tough to beat programs that are better than yours, even if you are at home. I think that's a little overblown. I think it's frustrating, to be such a passionate fan base and to not have success in the last, 6 years or so. It's a matter of time, though. I think hopefully, I think like you were saying, I think this year is a big telltale sign of whether or not, it is going to have to be a big reset button again, or if, I think we have, the right coaches and the right players coming in that it can really help the program.
This is something I asked Brady Hess too last week about the types of fans now that come to Virginia Tech games. I mean, you're similar to Brady in that, you grew up going to Virginia Tech games. You're Hokie for life. And, there was a lot of talk last year. I'm sure you followed it from a distance about the fans leaving games at halftime. Maybe they're just not engaged anymore. And certainly maybe the team has something to do with that, mediocre the last few years and barely making it to bowl games. Do you think that Virginia Tech still has a passionate fan base? Do you think that we're not seeing as many fans as you, for example, where, growing up, going to Tech games and coming to Virginia Tech? I mean, has the fan base changed at all? Or do you still feel like that passion is still there?
I think the passion's still there. I think a lot of it has to do with why, it's not just Virginia Tech where attendance numbers are down. It's almost across the country where that kind of thing's happening. I think a lot of that has to do with, me, being a sports reporter, ESPN. It's so easy to get sports highlights and sports news that it's harder to fill stadiums because a lot of people would rather sit, at home and watch the game. I coming from a family of passionate fans, and having a lot of family friends that are passionate fans, they haven't gotten less passionate by any means. They still go to games, they still tailgate. I mean, maybe the student section is less passionate, and I think maybe a lot of that has to do with the fact that the hype of when I was in high school, Virginia Tech was great, and so going to Virginia Tech, you were going to a football school, and that was a big thing. Whereas, the students that are there now, maybe when they were in high school hearing about Virginia Tech, that was a 6-6 program. They weren't hearing about them on ESPN. So, maybe the casual fan that wasn't a fan before they came to Virginia Tech, it's tough to get behind a team that, when you got there wasn't great, and then can sometimes be disappointing at times. And then, I think an easy answer is social media. I think that's one that a lot of people would like to say is, a problem. And maybe it does. I have plenty of friends and classmates that I knew that, they weren't all that interested in the actual product on the field, but more so the event. And once the event got boring, AKA, 20 minutes of nothing happening, then they leave. And, there's a lot of people that just aren't sports fans that go to games, and once they get bored, they're going to leave. I think that an open lottery system for students would be a great, not open lottery, but season tickets for the student section. It's so tough to get tickets sometimes as a student, or it was when I was there. Maybe they've changed it, but it's still. I think if you're a real fan and you don't have a ticket or any means to get in, maybe you sit at home and watch it, but. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things, and I think that's something that's actually happening everywhere. And it's easy to point fingers at things when things aren't going the way you want it to go as, a fan or a Virginia Tech fan.
Talking about this current pandemic that has really shook up all of sports. I mean, you've seen it basically affect your job to a large extent. And I know you obviously you would claim to be a medical expert, but do you think we'll have football in the fall? I guess from my personal opinion, at least up to this point, is it might be a little bit easier to have the NFL come back just because you've got professional athletes. I think contract wise, you might be able to work out some of that situation. But college football, on the other hand, I think they stand the most to lose really in terms of especially if you're not bringing in fans. I mean, that's a huge chunk of revenue, especially for teams like even ECU that is a smaller school, but, like you mentioned, has a passionate fan base. So what's kind of your whole take on that situation?
I would disagree with you on college football having less to lose. I think they have way more to lose. If there's no football at all, football feeds every other sport that a school has. I mean, that is the only product, maybe basketball for fewer programs, but that is what that athletic fund you have comes from football, and ticket sales are one of the lowest and concessions are one of the lowest amounts of revenue that you get. A lot of it comes from TV deals or conference deals, or if you're East Carolina and you go play at South Carolina, they pay you money to come play. That's $500,000 that the school's not going to get if they don't go and play that game. So do I think that there will be football? I do. At this point, and I think a lot of it's going to be with a lot of risk. And I think what's kind of scary is that I really do think that schools are going to take risks because of money, and hopefully nobody, gets really sick and the worst thing happens. I do think that schools are going to take a lot of risks. I mean, you look at Alabama, it came out that they had, 7 or so players that have had it, and there's been virtually no talk about the SEC season not actually happening. So I think there's a lot of risk involved. I think a lot of people don't know what's going to happen. And, I think everyone's hoping and praying that it doesn't get worse. And if it does, who knows? I hope it happens. But I would think that, football with no fans is more realistic than no football at all.
Sounds good. And I guess to close out our conversation, we're going to do a rapid fire round. It's not literally one word answers, but you can expand on a little bit. But let's get right to it. Who is the greatest NFL quarterback of all time?
NFL quarterback of all time, Tom Brady, without a doubt. You can't. I mean, how old is he? He's like 60 years old. So I think you can't. No one has been doing it so good for as long as Tom Brady has.
Jordan or LeBron?
Jordan. No doubt. I spoke that truth before the documentary came out, and that more so solidified that opinion.
Super Bowl champion next year. Who do you think's going to win it?
I'd like to see Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. I don't know if I think they will, but I'd like to see it. Bruce Arians, he's a Hokie, so I'll root for the Bucs.
Do you think Tyrod Taylor has a chance to play this year?
I would be stunned if he's not starting the first week. Although, to be honest with you, I don't know if he's actually under contract at the moment. But if he's not starting week one, I would be very surprised. And hopefully he wins some games and he can get another real season underneath his belt. He had a couple of good years in Buffalo, and um, I'm pulling for him.
Who's Virginia Tech's biggest rival in your opinion? I know the easy answer might be UVA, but some maybe older fans might say, well, when we played Tennessee and when we played West Virginia back in the day, man, those were some great games. Who would you say is Tech's biggest rival?
If you ask any lifelong Hokie fan, they'll swear to UVA all day long. So it's UVA, and there's not a second. If you think that it's not UVA, it's because maybe you've just recently started following over this past 15 years or however long it was. And UVA fans and Virginia Tech fans, the culture of the two schools is pretty different. And that clash being in the same state, I think really fuels that fire.
All right, well, how about this? How about what's one team you'd like to see the Hokies schedule a home and home with? It might be a West Virginia, maybe a Tennessee. Hokies have been doing this with some schools like ECU up until recently. Is there one team you're like, man, it'd be nice if we could start scheduling home and homes with those guys?
I don't think that East Carolina Virginia Tech will play for a while, but I sure wish they would while I was here. But West Virginia is great. That rivalry was real, and those were two schools that really didn't like each other. So I think that's a good one, especially now that West Virginia's in the Big 12, and getting a Big 12 win would be great. And I think they're two programs that have a very similar skill set and budget, and I think they're very similar teams in terms of their competition level. So West Virginia would be great. Tennessee. I've never bought into the whole Tennessee Virginia Tech hype. Maybe there is some. I don't remember much other than the Orange Bowl or the Chick-fil-A Bowl when the Hokies took it to them.
And I know we've had this discussion before, and I'm not gonna, because this is we're interviewing you, I'm not gonna give you my opinion, but college football versus the NFL, and I guess expand upon it too, because I think this is really an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah, college football all day. You won't have people that the fan bases of college football are so much stronger and tightly knit than it is in the NFL, in my experience. The NFL is great, and it's a great product, and it's an amazing moneymaker, and it's a great business. And what they're doing with the draft is exciting. It's a whole show. I mean, NFL is almost a reality TV show more so than it is, football. And college football, it's nuts and bolts. It's my guys versus your guys. It's coaches traveling across the country to sit down with the player and a high school locker room to get him to come give his all for his team, and not being able to pay him at the moment. And I feel like the fact that those types of relationships and the product and a kid making the decision to come across the country to play for a school and represent something is something that the NFL does not match in any shape or form.
Do you not see an argument at all in terms of, sometimes you have some of these retreads winning the college football championship? It only seems like it's a few teams. You got the Clemsons, the Alabamas, a team from the SEC like LSU last year. Even a school like Virginia Tech, who, has had a solid program and, solid fan base, hasn't really been able to sort of get to that mountaintop. Is that an argument you see at all? I mean, do you worry about college football's parity or lack thereof? I mean, or is that something you don't really, not really concerned about?
No, I think that's a good argument. And that wasn't really a great argument maybe 5 years ago. I think with the college football playoff, that has kind of pushed that narrative a little further, because if you do lose a game, you still have another shot at winning a national title. Whereas before, if you're Virginia Tech, for example, and let's say Virginia Tech, they schedule a solid non-conference, or they play one Power 5 school, they beat them, and they win the ACC. Let's say Clemson has a bad year. It was easy. It's very doable to have an undefeated season, but then you'll have to play, two great schools. It's just harder to actually win a national championship now with the college football playoff. And so the best team does win every year. But like you said, I think there is a little bit of parity. But, I mean, also look at the coaches that are there. I think more so it's more of a tip of the hat to the fact that, some of the best coaches are winning it. So if you're an up-and-coming coach and you're with the program, there's no reason why, you can't do it once Nick Saban, Dabo Sweeney retires. They have the most money and they're able to have higher recruiting budgets and whatnot. But I think it's definitely an argument that's there. But for the most part, I still would say that the fact that anybody can win it is still there. But that's definitely a point. And I think the college football playoff has kind of pushed that narrative a little further and has definitely given it some truth.
And my final question for you is if you could have if you would pay money to see one athlete, doesn't matter what sport, you would pay one athlete to see him play in person, who would it be and why?
Does it have to be current?
No. I mean, I guess, yeah, you can answer it however you want.
I would have loved to see the Miami Heat with Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and Chris Bosh and Axon in person. I think that would have been a lot of fun. So if not them, it's got to be an NBA team. Steph Curry, maybe LeBron James. I'd like to see a competitive LeBron James in person for sure. I think that would be the one.
Nolan, thank you so much for your time. We had a chance to discuss a lot of different things. Of course, your affinity for Virginia Tech, your current job as a sports broadcaster, and of course, had a chance to talk about some hot topics in the sports landscape, which is good, obviously, considering we don't have much going on right now. But really want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man, even on your day off, planning for tomorrow. And really appreciate our conversation and looking forward to it next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it.
So for my guest, Nolan Knight, I'm Billy Parvatam. This has been the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. We'll see you next time. Take care.